Hi, I'm Jordan Maxwell, and with me right now is Dr. Roger Leir. Roger Leir, spelled L-E-I-R. Dr. Roger Leir has been a dear friend of mine for many years. He's famous around the world as being the doctor and the man who takes the alien implants out of people. Scientists today, it's extraordinary hearing people who call themselves scientists who will say, well, if there's anything to this UFO alien presence that you talk about, show me something that's solid. Show me a piece of the ship, or show me something that I can look at scientifically. And when I hear that, I think how ludicrous on the face of that is. Because here, I know two people in this world who have very solid things that you can hold and look at that are not of this world, that scientists refuse to even acknowledge. They don't want to hear about it, they don't want to look at it, they don't want to discuss it. Why? Is because they're not prepared to deal with the subject. They don't want to deal with the subject because it's not their subject, it's somebody else's subject, so they don't want to deal with it. And besides, I don't think that they really have the background and the experience, and they know it, so they don't want to deal with subjects that they don't understand. And so much of science does not understand that we are being visited by other life forms. Government knows it, and individual researchers and government people, military people know it. But Dr. Leir is actually the man who is famous for taking alien implants out of people, out of the inside the body, and can then hand the implant to a scientist or a laboratory to check it out, and it's amazing what he's finding inside people's bodies. You want to tell them a little bit about some of the more extraordinary stuff?
Well, certainly we've done 16 cases now for the removal of these objects. And when we look at all these cases in total, we can see, number one, that there's similarities between them. Mm-hmm. These are not random pieces of metallic material that people step on or get in their bodies, like the debunkers would like you to think. These are very specialized. I call them devices because they're devices that are manufactured and engineered for a specific purpose, and when we look at them and take them apart, so to speak, and you look at them through the mechanism of science, through scanning electron microscopy, doing tests for looking at isotopic ratio like ICP-MS and these other exotic tests which are expensive to do. And then you look at the internal aspect of these objects, and you see things like carbon nanotubes, single-wall carbon nanotubes, carbon nanofibers, and a group of carbon nanofibers that put together in a carbon nanostrand. I mean, what does that remind you of? It reminds you of taking a single wire, and then you put the single wire together with other wires, and you make a bundle of wires, and then you put those together and you make a cable. So here, this is done on the basis of engineering down to the atomic level, where we're dealing with some of these nanostructures. And then we see other things, Jordan. We see crystals of sodium chloride, for example. And sodium chloride is salt, table salt, but in nature, table salt is a random crystalline structure. Sometimes they're round and sometimes they have points and so on. But in these structures are all rectangular and what we call orthorhombic crystals of varying size. And that takes you back many, many years ago to the advent of radio. And radio, primitive radio was a crystal set. Mm-hmm. And so we still don't know today what is it that's in a crystal that will pick up and broadcast a radio frequency so that you can capture this frequency and stick something on it like a carrier wave, and then you can hear a radio station. The simplistic of devices. Well, here is something which is much more complex, because we see other things that we don't understand. We see the carbon nanostructures, we see these orthorhombic crystals, we see ovoids, we see spheres, and we see other triangular pieces of objects that are base metals, or the atomic structure of which we don't understand in the internal aspect of these objects. So that's why I say they're manufactured devices, undoubtedly implanted into the body of certain abductees, and they broadcast a radio signal that is detectable in our electromagnetic spectrum. But most probably an advanced culture, an advanced race, is not using our electromagnetic spectrum. They may be using scalar wave technology, but the slop over or the offshoot of this may be detectable in our electromagnetic spectrum. So when we detect a radio frequency or we detect a radio wave, that's not the whole story. They're getting the whole story. Well, we're not. And you say scientists, don't want to look at these things. But, one of the things I found since the beginning is no matter where they are in academic science, most all the scientists are praying to higher masters, that you would understand. The guy that writes the paycheck. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their house. They don't want to tell the wife, I lost my job because I'm looking at non-terrestrial material. No, they want to hang on. So when you hang on and you're pasted into this kind of a condition, you turn a blind eye. And that's the way it is.
That's exactly what has happened in all the fields of endeavor in human experience, in banking, in government, religion, and all of the different institutions. There's very, very few people who will stand up for truth and look at it scientifically. I've always said that religion should be a science, but science is a religion now. Science has its holy books, its holy priesthood, and people, as you said, scientists are afraid to even touch anything that's not in the mainstream, because we're talking about money, we're talking about employment, and they don't want to lose their employment, their paycheck, so they're not interested. Even if you have something which is legitimately taken out of a person's body that is not of this world, too many scientists don't want to talk about it.
And I think if you look back historically, this is evident in history. Look at Galileo. Look at Copernicus.
Look at Nikola Tesla and
Tesla.
royal wife and God
right.
knows all them.
But Galileo was persecuted by the church, and he said, "Just please, if I'm such a bad guy, look through the telescope." We can't do that. That's a work of the devil, and that's a sin.
That's right.
So they didn't bother to look.
That's right. Still the same kind of mentality today, in the face of overwhelming proof that there is something going on this earth. Explain to the audience how this these little things that you cut out of people's bodies, they are obviously giving out some kind of a signal, so they must have a power source. I thought that was fascinating, the power source for these little devices that are put in people's bodies.
Well, we can theorize, what the power source is based on what we know about the human body in our primitive state as far as the advancement of science is concerned. We know that there are high energy bonds in the body called ATP bonds, adenosine triphosphate bonds. These bonds are chemical energetic bonds that are such a high energy bond that any one of them could ignite the body into spontaneous combustion. Or if they all ignited, you would actually cause an explosion. So that's the amount of energy, the sum of energy that's in our body. So you can tap into this energy, for example, and it becomes a power source, such as what's done in universities like UCLA, where they're trying to tap into neuroenergy, convert that neuroenergy into electrical energy to run little servo motors in a prosthetic hand. And this is being done now. This is in our science. But now we're looking, Jordan, at a different possibility. We're looking at the possibility where the devices themselves may not tap the body for its energy source. In other words, if we can compare a space vehicle that's being driven by a Earth-based laser, which they have now, what are you doing? You're essentially projecting energy from an Earth-based source to an object and propelling it. So then why isn't it possible for an advanced civilization to actually beam like Tesla did, without wires, without anything, actually beam energy into the object and then use the body for such things as an antenna circuit. Now we know mostly all these objects are associated close to bone. You know, why? Why are they close to bone? Close to bone yet superficial. Well, perhaps the bone, our skeletal structure, it's made of calcium and carbon and other and iron and other elements, which if you stop and think about, they would make an excellent antenna.
That's true.
So perhaps we're the antenna. Perhaps the energy is external.
That's fascinating. And the fact that the body, no matter where it is in the human body, these little things are found, the body doesn't know it's there.
That's right. There's absolutely no rejection reaction. There is no inflammatory reaction. And we believe that there is a biological aspect to this. One of the things, of course, that we haven't done because, like most of the research done in the field of ufology, there's no money. If we had the money, just think what we could have learned. But we've never. We know that there's a coating. It's kind of a ceramic biological coating that goes around them. And perhaps this coating may be the same DNA as the host. They may have taken that, matched the DNA to the host, put it in, and then you would get absolutely no reaction whatsoever. And this is what we find.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But if they're matching it to your particular body, then the body wouldn't notice any difference.
That's right, because it's your stuff.
Yeah, and the way that people find that they have something in their body is usually by accident, that they hurt their leg or break their arm or something, and they're having an x-ray of their arm or leg or whatever, and then they find in the x-ray a piece of metal inside the body that they didn't know was there. Then when you go in and cut it and take it out, then you find out that this is, like you said, some kind of a little device. That in itself is extraordinarily interesting, that there are actual metal devices being put into humans, and what do you think they're being put in there for? To monitor somehow?
Well, you know, it's safe if you want to stay with the scientific method to theorize. And that's all we can do is theorize. But a theory has to be taken into a laboratory and either proven or disproven. So it's still safe to provide theories. There are different theories. Are they devices for tracking you? I doubt it. That's pretty primitive because we know that DNA has its own electronic signature. So if you're an advanced culture, all you got to do is build a device that can track your particular electronic signal. It can find you anywhere on the planet, or maybe anywhere in the universe.
Right.
So what do we need a tracking device? Are the behavior modification device? I don't think they're behavior modification devices either, because from what we know from abductees, those that are the abductors can get in your head. They don't have to be even next to you to get in your head.